Today we're covering credit cards, a minor convenience or a major pain in the neck. Credit cards are surprisingly complicated. If you have one, pull it out and just start looking at all of the things that are on one. If you don't have one, just steal somebody else's and return it. We're not condoning theft here. Okay, so the first thing to consider is, again, as always, articles below to help flesh out these details, but there's the merchant, the acquirer, and the issuer. Now, the merchant would be like whoever you're buying something from. The issuer is the one who gives you the credit card. Let's say you get a credit card from, say, Bank of America. It might say Bank of America on it, but the acquirer is this in-between entity that could be, say, Visa or MasterCard or someone like that. And so there's the merchant, the acquirer, and the issuer. So the issuer issues the card to you, the acquirer acquires the merchant's business, and then you use the card at the merchant's business. Now the steps when you use it is this entire complicated process of authorization, batching, clearing, funding, and as each part of this process is that there are certain fees involved in a credit card transaction that primarily fall on the merchant. And so the merchant ends up paying, say, 2, 3, 3.5% of what you are paying to the merchant. And they're basically losing this to the credit card processors and the issuer and everybody else involved in this process. So why do you think that companies accept credit cards as payment if they're losing 2, 3, 4%? I mean, maybe they're only making 6% on this margin on this product, and they're losing half of that to these credit card companies. Well, they might be doing it because they might be afraid to lose your business entirely if a credit card option is not available. Now, this is something that in certain circumstances can come back to bite you because let's say if you want to use your credit card to, say, pay for rent in order to automate and make things easy for your life, well, your landlord isn't going to appreciate that they're going to be losing 2, 3, 4% of your total rent to, say, the credit card processors. And so they are going to encourage you or perhaps even penalize you if you use a credit card. So they might charge you a 4% transaction fee if you pay for a credit card. So it's just something to be aware of. There are circumstances where the merchant will or can pass that on to you. A few more bits on the credit card issuer, since that's who you primarily interact with. And that's, the bank, the credit union, the financial institution that provides you the credit card. The Bank of America, the JP Morgan Chase, whoever, the Capital One. Often you can obtain credit cards directly from these credit card companies. The acquirer can also be the issuer, like in the case of American Express, let's say. But to understand kind of what's going on the issuers, and every time you buy something on a credit card, you're essentially borrowing money from the issuer. So the issuer is actually immediately paying the merchant, and then you owe the issuer. And so if you tend to pay off your credit card bill in full, you tend to pay no interest. And so credit cards are in a way an interest-free loan, and the cost of this transaction is kind of pushed off onto the merchant or who you bought the product from. Let's go through some of the credit card fees and costs that you can be hit with. The first one is an annual fee. So you pay the credit card company the privilege for having their card. So how often should you be paying an annual fee? Well, no more than annually at minimum, but mostly never. This is annual fees. We'll talk a little bit about credit card gaming and how that can happen. But most cards with the annual fees are most likely they are not the right product for you. There are also application fees, and these should be very rare. It's generally for those with bad credit to have application fees. If you're in a situation where you have to pay an application fee because you have bad credit, maybe this isn't the right moment to be getting a credit card, potentially. Before we get into interest charges, we need to know the term APR, the annual percentage rate. In a way, you can just think of this as the interest rate. And this is what's used to calculate your interest charges. Now, because you are doing all you can to avoid a credit card balance and paying it off in full every month, then as long as you're paying off your credit card bill in full every month, you're avoiding the interest charges. So shooting for never there. Balance transfer fee is when you transfer what you owe on one credit card to another credit card. We're shooting for never there, because if we're avoiding balances, then we don't need to transfer any balances. A cash advance fee, that's just an extra penalty if you, instead of using it directly, you change it to cash. So we should be shooting for that never. Some credit cards have decline fees. Really, we're shooting for never there. Our card hopefully should not have this. Foreign transaction fees. If you are going to be hit with a lot of foreign transaction fees, they can hit you with 1%, 2%, 3% of the amount that you're spending every time it's a foreign transaction. If this is going to be your situation often, there are travel cards, or say Capital One or other issuers that are out there that do not charge foreign transaction fees. So be aware that you can avoid these altogether. Late fees, we should be shooting for never on late fees. We always pay them off, or at the very least make more than the minimum payment so you don't get hit with the late fee as well. And then finally, over the limit fees, we are never going over this limit, right? Perfect. Depending on your credit score and the card that you have, your APR is going to range. That interest rate is going to range from perhaps as low as 13% all the way up to, say, 23, 25, 28%. So if you do not pay off your credit card in full, you are going to pay interest on it. And these interest rates are really, really high compared to, say, mortgage interest rates or student loan interest rates or other rates that are out there. So on top of that, if you pay late, you're going to be hit with a fee. So at the very least, if you cannot pay it off in full, you need to pay off as much as you can. And one thing to know, many auto pay programs, even if you sign up for them, they'll often not kick in until the second month. So just make sure you don't get burned on one of those, and make sure that any auto pay with a credit card kicks in when you believe it is going to kick in. So one small thing to be aware of. Now, one of the most frequent traps that people fall into is, cash is tight 1 month, so instead of paying it off in full, I'm just going to make the minimum payment this once. And it becomes this trap of, I'm just going to make the minimum payment, and then the following month just the minimum payment. And what it turns into is that, from the issuer's perspective, borrow money from us and you can pay us, 15% or 20% or whatever it is annually for what seems like forever. It can be 15, 20 years and such. And this is a temptation that we need to avoid, this minimum payment trap. Now, that being said, minimum payment is better than no payment at all, because one, you're going to be hit with the late fee, as we just discussed, but also no payment goes on your credit report. So you have the fees and you get a ding on your credit report. This is not minimum is better than zero. That is the key thing to remember. Also related to the minimum payment trap is this introductory APR concept, which is, instead of, say, 15% interest, we're going to say 4% interest for the first 4, 5, 6 months, or maybe even a year. And what this can do, psychologically to us, is that we have this incentive. We're going to rack up this credit card debt at zero cost or a very little cost. And then there will be a cost, and it will be significant. And the rate goes from, say, 0 or 4% or whatever it is, all the way up to its normal rate of 15, 18, 23. As far as me personally, I am not going to trust myself with that kind of power. I'm just going to pay it off. Not have to worry about it, not have it consume any of my mind space. So how can I avoid this credit card debt? Well, going back to day one of classes is don't buy anything that I don't already have money for. And so I'm in the situation where I'm not racking up any costs that I can't eventually pay for in the next month. So that means I need to keep track of my balance, or even better, I could just budget, and then I know kind of what's going out the door and what's coming in the door. Another method that people use is consider only using, credit cards for like pure emergencies. And this can, really help some people and say, the whole credit card in a block of ice type of thing. If this is an emergency, if I have to wait for it to melt. And this, what some people will do is that they'll have their credit card, they'll put something small on it, some small monthly recurring payment. They'll have it auto pay off, just, to have something for their credit report. And then on top of that, they'll say, I'm just not going to use it. I'll just use my debit card in other circumstances. Now, when you do get your bill and something unknown charge pops up, some unknown charge pops up, this could be for a lot of reasons. Why did this happen? Well, it could be a mistake. Someone could have just made a mistake on a charge. It could be an expense, and you made the mistake. It's not on the other side. It's not by the merchant. It's like, oh, I just didn't remember that I bought that XYZ thing. It could be some sort of identity fraud going on. But in any of the above scenarios, you need to figure out what that is. Like, what's going on? Is it a mistake on the merchant's part? Is it your mistake, or is this identity fraud? Well, you need to pin that down and figure out what's going on so you don't end up with, a bigger problem on your hands. Now, your situation might be that you've already incurred credit card debt. You might be asking yourself, like, what if I've already incurred this credit card debt and I'm paying these high interest rates? Like, what should I do? Well, one thing to keep in mind is that short of, some pretty extreme loan products, credit card debt is kind of the most expensive debt out there. So out of all kind of the standard forms of loans, credit card debt's generally the highest. And so your priority should be to knock that down in the short term. My personal recommendation is what I call the extreme cutbacks method, with this celebration or reward at the end. And so for my situation, it would be, I am not going to eat out. I'm not going to do these other things that are currently costing money right now. And I'm going to plan for some big celebration or party once I've paid off these credit cards. And so as far as the celebration, movie, dinner, all sorts of other, fun things to do for a day with using the money that I would have had to use for that loan, I can reward and treat myself at the end. So I have something to look forward to. So it's like, go through some cutbacks now with a reward at the end. Now, the average credit card debt size in the United States, it depends on how you calculated it, but it's generally around $7,000 on what the average is, on how people estimate it. Now, yours could be higher, it could be lower, but if you're going this extreme cutback method, it's going to depend on your debt and income and that situation, but it could take around, say, 1 to 6 months to get out of that hole, even if you're using this extreme cutbacks method. So it's something that you can keep plugging away at, keep yourself motivated, keep knocking it down. Now, if self-control is an issue, some people will resort to what's called the plastic surgery method, and that's simply to cut up your credit cards. And it's like, we're not using these anymore, and we're done. And you're just going to switch to debit cards because that's the easiest method for your personal situation. And for some people, that's a perfectly valid option for you to pursue. Now, assuming you're not in the boat of cut up the credit cards with plastic surgery, what are the benefits of a credit card? Well, first of all, it can up your credit score over time because you have those kind of monthly payments that are successfully getting made. So, and also having, the older a credit card is, the higher your average amount of, your credit history is just going up and up and up. So as far as for your credit score, if you get a card with no annual fee, then you just kind of keep it for the rest of your life and it's being paid off. Maybe even if you're using other cards in the future, it's something to keep that average credit history up. Also, you can, the most basic form of credit card benefit is cash back. So remember, the credit card companies charging the merchant, say 2% or 4% or whatever it happens to be with that merchant. Well, what you can do, you can get cash back. So the issuer can kick you back some of that fee so that you're getting a slice of that pie. So it's a cash back. They usually average between 1 and 1.5%. The very best cashback rewards reach to around 2%. And this is frequently the best option for people because it's super not complicated. You set up, auto pay and auto deposit for your cash back, and it doesn't take any more time or effort. If you're willing to really put in your homework, points can really pay off, or at least pay off to a greater degree than cashback can. So what could you get with points? There are, gas rewards or air miles or travel rewards or just kind of random stuff rewards. And in my experience, I've been in the points bucket and definitely benefited from points, but the amount of homework and time that it consumed in my life, it just kind of wasn't worth it anymore. We'll talk about credit card gaming in a moment, but I was gaming to a very small extent. Anyway, at a certain point in my life, I just transitioned to the cashback method, finally was able to get a card that was doing 2% cashback, and I'm like, that's perfect. Simplify my life, value my time, moving forward. So that could be something to say, look forward to and benefit from to a small degree. Now the fallacy, the cashback fallacy of earn money to make money, and this has been detected in kind of psychological experiments where if you're given cash back, then you're more likely to spend money on frivolous things that you don't really value. So again, need to make sure your spending aligns with your goals. Don't let cash back be factored into whether you purchase something. Just consider it something as a benefit that just pops up every once in a while for a small amount of money. If you let it factor into whether you should buy something or not, you can frequently end up having spent more on your credit cards than you otherwise intended to. So about 10% of the credit card holding population out there, 10% of those with credit cards are considered credit card gamers. These aren't people who play lots of video games. Rather, it's kind of this version of extreme couponing, if you've heard of that. The people who, between these, 17 coupons and $2, they were able to buy 2 boxes of toothpaste or something like that. It's kind of like those people, except with credit cards. And so you're taking advantage of sign-up rewards and transitioning from one credit card to another in order to generate free rewards. And I actually know a few people who've kind of done it successfully, but if you accidentally mess up on this, it can ruin you financially because you're dealing with, quite a bit of money. So if you do decide to start becoming a credit card gamer and, gaming the credit card companies, you need to really put in your homework and probably find some kind of non-scammy people who do this really well. And, I personally, at this point in my life, I just don't think it's worth the time, but, a lot of people disagree. Others definitely do. So credit card gamers, they frequently call this churning. And what they're essentially doing is that they're applying for credit cards that generally have high sign-up bonuses. Spend a certain amount in the first, $1,000 in the first 3 months, and we're going to give you this reward. And so what credit card gamers will do is that they cash in these bonuses, and then they'll maybe cancel the cards or maybe just let them sit dormant and just do this over and over and over and over and over. And in some cases, what they will do is get credit cards and then transfer balances at 0% introductory APR and just transfer them from one card to another as well. This can work, but again, one mistake can really hurt you as far as your time, money, and sanity. But again, some people make it work. A quote from a Bloomberg story that I found was, he and his wife now have 43 cards, now counting more than 20 they've opened and closed in the past few years. They open an average of 15 cards per year. So for the majority of people, I would not recommend doing this. I'm mostly sharing this with you so that you know that it exists, and will not just instantly think, oh, this is just free money and I'm going to jump into it. No, the people who actually do this well actually spend a lot of time executing this properly, and they really know what they're doing. Now, I've included a link below to a video about Diane, who she found herself in a pretty difficult situation. And I posted some questions here. And so what I'd like you to do is, pause this video, go watch that video, and then think through each one of these questions. one of the key takeaways that I want you to think about is that if you have a credit card with you and it's available all of the time, basically your credit card responsibility-ness, for lack of a better phrase, is essentially determined by you at your weakest moments because it's always available. And so it's not shameful to say, you know what, like this type of, credit card availability, this isn't for me in my life because of, different things can happen in my life. And it's just, that's not something I want that to be a part of. Again, that's not something that I wouldn't look down on someone for making that decision. I mean, we've talked through the benefits of credit cards, but there are also some serious costs that can potentially lead you to financial ruin.